Welcome to the Everyone Active podcast. I am one of your hosts, Jo.
Hello, I am Michelle, your other host. How are you?
Really good. Did you see the exciting news that happened
Oh my
here?
goodness me.
Yay!
Amazing. So for people that don't know, tell us.
So Harpenden, which is where we are filming at, was the first stop on the Radio 1 Comic Relief run. So good old Jamie finished his first ultramarathon here on Monday just gone. So it was so good.
Was it really busy and buzzy?
Of course it is. I mean, Harpenden's big and buzzy anyway, let alone when you've got a charity, something involving fitness and outdoors.
What more do you want?
Go on, Team Harps.
Pop it in the pot.
Exactly that.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah, good day. But now we're podcasting again. I love our podcasts.
It's good, isn't it?
Are you good?
I'm really good. I've just been busy just training, doing lots of trainings again.
Yeah, our little master trainer.
So it's all good, yeah.
Oh, nice. We get another guest with us
We have
today.
we're very guesty, aren't we?
We are.
We like it.
I love this. So team, welcoming Michaela Thomas, our clinical psychologist.
Welcome. Thanks for coming on.
It's lovely to be here.
Thank you. So team, we are, as some of you may know, in Everyone Active Sleep Month. So Everyone Active U+, we've got Sleep Month, so there's a little bit of information available here. You might have been sent a couple of emails. But we have specifically brought Michaela in today because, Michaela, you specialise in ADHD, which can absolutely alter the way we sleep, sometimes change our bedtime routine. So we thought we'd love to get a podcast out there to loads of our members and whoever else might want to listen on what is ADHD, your background, how you're studying it, and then also kind of
Give some top tips.
how it affects that. So can you just let us know a little bit about you, like your qualifications and how you came into studying specifically ADHD as part of that psychology?
Sure. So I'm a clinical psychologist and psychotherapist and coach and author and speaker and all of these things. So you can kind of get the idea. You can kind of get the idea that I'm also ADHD because I'm multi-hyphenated and multi-talented, right? So I can't do one thing for too long without getting bored. So I'm now early 40s and I've been in psychology half my life. And that's the one thing that I've never really got bored of because I find new angles constantly. And in my work, having worked on all the way from inpatient wards where people have been really mentally unwell to coaching people who just like want a little bit of support and living their life according to their values, like the full range. I've worked with it. And I moved over to the UK from Sweden in 2010 because I wanted specifically to work in the primary care services, accessing help and support for more people with anxiety and depression, right? So I spent most of my life working with anxiety and depression. And then I moved into private practice. I've been running my company, the Thomas Connection, for about a decade now. And being an entrepreneur, when you have a busy, bright mind, that's quite challenging. So, but I love it because then I can have all the fun and the freedom and the flexibility of working for myself. So why did I come into ADHD? Well, because I worked with really high-striving women who were very productive, very busy, successful, but yet also felt like a low-level grade of anxiety, like a dread or a doom that was constantly there. And they would have episodes of burnout. They would just hit the wall, do too much, crash. And then I was starting to put two and two together, noticing that given my specialism for 15 years being perfectionism, I then noticed that more and more of the women who were coming to me for burnout, for stress, anxiety, perfectionism, they were actually undiagnosed ADHD.
Wow.
So that's how I came into narrowing that down as my niche.
Wow.
And then I got my own diagnosis about a couple of years ago.
And was that a surprise to you to get that diagnosis for yourself?
Yes and no, because I'm one of those people who are previously described as high functioning. Now we think of it as lower support needs. Because I had a job, I had a relationship, I had 2 kids, I have a career, I'm highly educated, but I'm also something that's called twice exceptional, which means I have, it sounds really knobby when you say it, but high levels of intelligence. So I'm highly gifted. So when you have a high IQ, you can compensate for some of your neurodevelopmental challenges with your brain. So I already thought of like lots of ways to accommodate for me throughout my life. So when I came to 39 and got the diagnosis, I'm like, that's why some of these things that other people kind of just do, I couldn't so easily do. And got, my knickers into a twist about things that other people just automatically did. I remembered to do. So, so that's the story. And now I've unmasked that, and obviously I've spoken about it on stages and on my own podcast. I write about it. So I couldn't do that journey. I couldn't support women fully, wholly in a neuro affirmative way without unmasking myself.
Amazing.
Yeah,
So ADHD, for people that aren't quite aware what it is, give us a little bit of a brief summary as to what is ADHD?
Well, it's a hard one because there's a lot of different communities that are triggered by the different descriptions. So there's obviously more of a medical model, which would think of it as a disability or disorder. So attention, hyperactivity, sorry, I said that wrong. Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, so ADHD. It used to be referred to as ADD, where you weren't hyperactive, but now we say either ADHD hyperactive type, ADHD inattentive type, or ADHD combined type when you're both.
Wow.
So we just don't do ADD anymore. So this is why it gets tricky, because whatever is the going explanation at the moment, in 5-10 years, they will be like, can't believe you said that. So it is a neurodevelopmental condition that you are born with, but there are also things that can happen through our lifetime that can exacerbate it, make it worse, or even brain injury, head trauma, can give you symptoms or signs of ADHD.
Wow, really? So is it, I'm going to say something like a trauma, a loss of a family member or a bad accident or something?
An event or something.
So that changes the or can change the neuroprogramming?
It can change it. So trauma is a tricky one of how that relates to ADHD, because neurodivergent people are more likely to experience trauma. So we're more likely to, especially like microaggressions, being criticized, being humiliated, bullied, teased. That's more likely for people who are differently wired, who might not fit in. So then if they're more likely to experience trauma, and then trauma also exacerbates any neurodivergence that we already have. So then it's like, what's the chicken and what's the egg?
Yeah.
But trauma doesn't necessarily cause ADHD. We have to be careful with causality. It's just, it makes it worse.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes sense that, because if you've been through harsh negative experiences, maybe when you've been criticized or humiliated or shamed, you're going to be more on the lookout for that. So we know that ADHDers who have experienced trauma also have higher levels of RSD. RSD is an acronym that means rejection sensitivity dysphoria. There's a link to sleep. I will get to that later. I promise. It's not just like go off on tangents, but it all fits together. So RSD is something that makes you feel like it's hurting physically when someone is giving you criticism, negative feedback, or even if you perceive that they're not liking you, perceiving that, oh, wow, they now hate me, you get the sort of same activation in your brain as if you're being physically injured.
Wow.
So it hurts.
And are all the discoveries, for want of a better term, because I'm going to guess that the brain is probably the least researched organ and muscle in our body. So is this now because the amount of scientific research that's actually being done, or is it because of the range of people that are now coming in maybe saying, actually, this is happening to me? So we've got a wider base of society to go, aha.
Interesting question. I think it's both, because we have more anecdotal evidence. I mean, obviously clinicians, practitioners like myself, we hear it in clinic, but equally we also have more research being funded, because the biggest issue with ADHD is that it's not been researched on girls and women as much as it has been for boys and men. So the image we have of ADHD is that of a boy who's actually very hyperactive, not inattentive, with, the ants in his pants, running around, can't sit still.
Yeah.
That's not often the experience for women. There are obviously women who are hyperactive type too, but it's much more an internal restlessness, can't switch off, overthinking, ruminating, self-doubt, think you're not good enough, wondering how other people are perceiving you. That's where the RSD comes in, thinking, oh no, they hate me now, they didn't reply to my text, oh, what have I done wrong? Feeling like you're too much and never enough in equal measure. And it has a huge knock on your sense of self, with self-criticism and shame.
Absolutely. I bet there are people listening to this podcast right now going, What is there a statistic for the amount of people potentially in the UK who are already diagnosed with ADHD?
Again, it's difficult because it depends on who you ask and how you define. If you think about neurodivergence as a whole, which can include things like ADHD, autism, dyspraxia, dyslexia, and Tourette's. There's a lot of things that fall under the umbrella, and it's really hard to tease out how many of people are just diagnosed with just ADHD when the overlap with, say, autism is also huge.
Right.
So we still don't quite know. There's some people who are talking about sort of the hidden 20% of people who have neurodivergent conditions, but at the moment it's hard to tell. So up to 5% perhaps people are ADHD, but again, I don't want
Hard
to
to
sort of
measure,
quote
yeah.
that because it's really difficult. We're on the doorstep of learning more about this, and I just want to dispel this myth that everyone is a bit ADHD these days, because that's just not true.
Mm-hmm.
The fact is that we're not over-diagnosing. We're still dealing with the backlog of all the people we missed.
Right,
all
yes.
the people like me who went through my entire childhood and nobody noticed.
So is that why we feel that it almost feels like there's been like a massive just increase in people that are suddenly coming out and saying, I've got this? Is that because of the backlog, would you say?
Yes, it's because of the shame and the self-criticism that made us hide for decades.
Wow.
Because we didn't fit the mold of the boy
Of the
who couldn't
boy
sit
running
still.
around the classroom, yeah.
And some people, just couldn't utilize their potential, right? People who just could not get the marks and the grades that they needed because they weren't able to focus, or they weren't able to concentrate, or they couldn't for the life of them understand the structure of what do I do in what order when they were studying. And that was not their fault. Literally not their fault. It's their brain wiring. And with the right scaffolding, with the right support, the right systems, and the right level of self-compassion, those people could have done remarkable things. But that just wasn't understood back then.
So if there's people listening now, because I'm sure there will be, and they're going, that sounds quite familiar, or do you know what? Actually, looking back at my university years or my school years, that did happen. Can people get diagnosed? Is it a visit a GP? Is it a visit a psychologist? What would you advise people to do?
So you need to go to someone who's a medical professional who's trained and skilled in doing the assessments. Someone like myself. So psychiatrists, psychologists, prescribing nurses. If you want to have an assessment, you've got two routes. Either you go through the NHS, and unfortunately for most parts of the UK, the waiting lists are many years long.
Yeah.
You can also go to something called Right to Choose. So if you go to your GP and say, I want to be referred to Right to Choose, there are different providers there, say ADHD 360 or Psychiatry UK. They are providers who are linked to the NHS, but again, the waiting times are very long. Or you can go and see someone who's a private practice psychologist like myself, where you then unfortunately have to self-fund. Yep. Some people have been able to get funding from their employers, for instance.
Oh, really?
So it really depends on, do you want the answers now, or are you willing to wait? And I wish that the system wasn't so broken.
Yeah, definitely. Can you take down some of those barriers as well? So if somebody came to see you, what's that assessment like? Because some people might be like, assessment, exams, help, pressure.
Yes, and forms, having to fill out forms. I try to do that as easy as possible. So again, because I don't work for the NHS, I can be more flexible in how I meet these needs. So I send multiple follow-ups. And I have an assistant who helps me keep track of people. So if you've inquired and then you forgot about it, I'm like, hi, here's a friendly reminder that you were interested in this. And I'll try to help people with doing their forms. And if they really struggle to kind of put things in writing, they can also voice note. Some people prefer to just dump it out verbally, and it's difficult to put it down. So we do our very best to kind of make that first access a little bit more neuroaffirmative.
Yeah.
But then in the assessment stage, you can either do it virtually. So I run a private practice from home, and you can either do it online with appointments spread out over a month. Some people really want to be able to think in between and like, oh yeah, that rings a bell from what I did when I was 12, or let's write that down, and they have an extra appointment. Some people just want to get it all done in a day. So then I offer, and I think I'm the first in the UK to do this, full home day retreats where I come and look after you, I pamper you, I treat you to food, I do a sensory experience that makes you feel at ease and relaxed. And rather than putting you on the spot, like, what was it like when you were 8? And then you go, I can't remember. We have conversations, and I listen really carefully for what I need to hear. Because I've been doing this for 20 years. And I know the women I'm really good at sensing, that the one who has been high masking, high functioning, and just keeping all the chaos down underneath the surface, with the resulting burnout as an impact of that. So then you come and get it all done in a day, get a full report, and then I follow up with support and coaching or therapy afterwards.
What does that look like once you've had that diagnosis? You know where you are. How does that look sort of moving forwards?
That's a really hard stage. I'm not going to lie about that. Because effectively, especially when you specialize in late diagnosed women like I do, they're looking at decades of learning history, of relationships that might have failed, of jobs they might have lost, or fallings out they've had with friends. When okay. So it's sort of similar feeling to people who go through, say, a 12-step program with AA. They have to go and make amends to people. Sometimes people feel the urge to go and contact people they have had in their life and explain, I didn't do it on purpose.
Right,
I couldn't
okay.
help it.
Yeah.
So there can be a real sense of relief and like, oh, it wasn't my fault. And we start to build compassion for yourself and acceptance. And that relief can be married with grief. Wow, I wish I would have known this when I was little. Had I known this about my brain, about myself, maybe I would have made different choices. Some of the relationships I wouldn't have entered or the jobs I would have been in. And then the journey really begins of starting to understand yourself and what systems do I need to put in place? What do I need to change in my life to actually live a better life with this condition?
I'm going to hit you with a really hard question now because I'm sure it's going to be very, very vast. Are there any specific traits that somebody who doesn't necessarily know that they've got ADHD might go, okay, I've got 5 out of the 6 of them or something?
Sure, there obviously are diagnostic traits from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders, the DSM-5, which is rather boring, but you can Google it if you're interested. But what we're listening for is obviously you need to meet the criteria. You can look at if you either meet criteria for the inattentive signs, like forgetfulness, maybe losing focus and concentration, getting easily distracted, misplacing your things, struggling to maybe follow appointments in your diary, maybe struggling with time management, being what we call in Sweden, time optimistic. So assuming it's going to take you 0 minutes to go to school and get your child, like I do, and leaving the house when you should actually be there. So today, the fact that I was on time for today is, I think, is remarkable.
Well done, by the way.
I left 15 minutes later than I had intended. But there's a lot of those things that are to do with our executive functioning, to do with our brain. So it's like the control center of the brain. Things like planning, organizing, structure, emotion, regulation, these things that people who are not ADHD, people who are neurotypical, can just do. And we just can't as well. So you might see that children who have traits of ADHD would have a up to 30% delay in how their executive functioning is developed. So what does that mean? That means that maybe if you have a child who's 8, take away 30% of their age, and that's kind of the maturity level that your child is at.
Wow.
The capability. So a child where you think they should be able to dress themselves, maybe they can't, because there's a lot of sequencing of tasks in getting dressed, getting organized, getting your stuff ready for school, getting out the door on time. That's a lot.
That is.
That is a lot.
So what was the percentage you potentially
About
mentioned?
30%.
About 30%.
Wow.
And the harrowing statistic is that when you then, as a woman, come into perimenopause, when a lot of women then obviously experience things like anxiety, brain fog, feeling a bit, more forgetful, then some measures are estimated that ADHD women have about 70% delay of their executive functioning. So you just go a little bit bananas, basically.
Yes.
I was saying this earlier. I was saying exactly that earlier. Yes.
Yeah. So then it's obviously the kind of thinking about clickbait articles being out there. Is it mum brain? Is it ADHD? Is it the perimenopause? And it's never as easy as, or it's either or, it's nuanced, because those women who are able to kind of hold it together, juggle all the things until they had a couple of kids or until they hit perimenopause, they can then no longer do it, essentially. So it's not, oh, well, I'm just perimenopausal. It's probably you now are no longer having the same scaffolding, or if you are overworking, perfectionistic, constantly near burnout, but you can crash into the weekend.
Yeah.
Go to the gym for as long as you wanted to get all your sillies out, all the exercise would help you feel better. And then suddenly you've had kids, you can't leave the house, can't travel like you used to, can't go to the gym, can't exercise like you used to, can't sleep like you used to. And then the wheels start to come off.
Yeah, and that's
me.
where we would love
your
delve
expertise.
deeper. So when we're talking about sleep and we talk about a sleep routine or the avoidance of blue light or having a quieter room, obviously there is a different channel for an ADHD brain. And you've mentioned burnout a lot of times already. Can you just talk about people that might struggle to get to sleep, that people might struggle staying asleep, and then also actually whether they're staying asleep for long enough? Can we just talk about sleep in an ADHD brain?
There's so many aspects of that.
Yeah.
So one is the sort of the going to bed, right? So this is where we have the, I think the Instagram term is revenge bedtime procrastination. Okay. I know, all of these clickbaity things, right? But That's when you've been sort of dealing with the kids or you've been faffing about and suddenly you got a moment to yourself, then you don't want to go to bed because now you're going to sit there and scroll on your phone or catch up on binge watching TV.
Yep.
And that's something that can happen for a lot of neurodivergent people that just cannot then go to bed because they might be really tired. They might be exhausted and they're craving dopamine. They're craving stimulations of some kind. So then if you're already tired, you're kind of deprived of dopamine and there is your phone with scrolling of Instagram or whatever. And then you get
hit.
Yeah.
You get a hit, right?
Yep.
So social media algorithms are built to give you a hit of dopamine.
Yeah.
So you'll stay on it for as long as possible and take your attention. So if you're then already a bit tired and then you either sit and eat or scroll or just do other stuff that's not helpful and then you don't go to bed. So I'm really conscious that if I say anything like sleep hygiene tips for anyone listening, you might all just know those things. It's not news anymore about blue light, really, and not scrolling on your phone or putting your phone in a different room. These are things that are actually quite now common knowledge. The problem with ADHD is that you will override that. So whatever, filter you have on your phone to make it black or white, maybe to make it less dopamine, if you want to look at it, you just turn the filter off and look at it anyway. Yeah. So it's that sense of, I'm just not going to do it. Because the inner petulant child that comes out in the ADHD, or is the rebellion that we bring, is that you could just override that. So the thing to consider is making it as difficult as possible to get the hit.
Right.
Right. So what does that look like?
Locking it into a box. No jokes.
Really?
Yeah. Apps like Freedom, Forest, Focus Quest, these kind of apps where you can toggle it on and control what distractions are turned off, and then you literally... On the Forest app, for instance, if you then try to go onto something, it says, "But your tree will die." So I don't want to kill my tree. No. So then you might kind of get that reminder: why am I doing this? Because it's the mindlessness, it's the mindless scrolling of I'm just sitting here because I cannot get off it. One thing that I usually say to clients is trying to count downwards. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, off. Whereas if you say, I'm just going to do 10 more minutes, that is never ending.
Yeah.
Okay.
That could carry on for forever. But if you go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blast off, like I say, because my daughter does that, nursery rhyme, and then go blast off, put it away. It's really hard. Sometimes you just have to have someone else that takes the phone out of your hand, like my husband does.
Physically take it. Really?
He's like, I'm just going to put that away now. And he hides it somewhere. Because I cannot be trusted.
Yeah.
The dopamine pull is so strong and it's not your fault. It is addictive for a reason.
Wow.
So replacing that with other things that give dopamine. Like a lot of people can find that sensory stimulation can give dopamine, like eating crunchy things. Like I love plum tomatoes because they like crunch and, there's more vegetables, right? So that's good for you. So if you feel that need, like I just need stimulation in the evening, having a hot drink that tastes nice or eating something crunchy. And then obviously, I'm sure you're going to love this, movement.
Yes.
Movement, because you cannot think your way out of these gremlins that come into your mind, especially in the evening. You cannot think your way out of it because you haven't thought your way into it. They are just there, and movement is the thing that shifts you out of it.
So movement around the house, movement, structured exercise, or is it just anything that's going to literally move your body?
Anything. So finding what works for you. Sometimes ADHDers can feel that they see barriers. So I can't go to the gym because I have to pack my bag, or I can't be bothered to do yoga because I have to bring the yoga mat. Yeah. So doing whatever you can. Like sometimes I've put on like a 10-minute energy shot video in the kitchen whilst the slow cooker is going and I'm hopping around in my pajamas. Like just meet yourself as you are. Doesn't matter. Some people find it helpful to just live in yoga wear so that if they fancy to stretch, they're not prohibited by their clothing. They just live in comfortable clothes so they can move whenever. Because movement is absolutely medicinal for ADHD.
There you go. We should say to all of our Everyone Active members as well that everyone has got access to Everyone on Demand and it's on their app, literally there. And there are thousands of classes from breathwork and meditation through to us two doing HIIT classes as well. So
there's
whatever you're feeling, you need that, whether it's a relaxation, whether it's a breathe, whether it's a movement as part of a class. Yeah, Everyone on Demand has got that there for you if needed.
I love that comment because it's then the wisdom of knowing, do I need to go up or down in energy? So I call that up-regulating or down-regulating. That's really hard. And that connects into sleep as well. So if you always have say a HIIT class or high rocks or whatever these
Yep.
things that are really trendy at the moment, that brings a lot of energy, maybe raising your pulse a lot, which is great for heart health, but can give you lots of cortisol.
Yes.
So then does that make you sleep well? If that knackers you out, some people can go on a fast run and feel like, oh, I've released all the energy.
Yeah.
It's gone now. I can now soften into sleep. Some people are tired but wired.
Yeah, so I get like that.
So exercise in the evening might not work for you.
Yeah, totally. If I'm teaching in the evening, I don't sleep. I'm totally wired.
Yeah. I used to go to a dance class that I loved, like a dance hall Afrobeats class. And I would come home at like 9:30. I was like, just buzzing. It's like I've been to the club.
Yeah, literally.
Been out, and then I can't wind down. So for me, it's that wisdom of doing what works. So I can do yoga classes in the evenings and strength, weights, running, swimming I could do in the evening as well, because it's like having a warm bath.
Yes.
So that kind of works. If there is a jacuzzi, so I can have the warmest temperature before bed. I can't go from a cold swimming pool to bed. No. So having that awareness of your sensory sensitivities, your energy management, what do you like in terms of your daily rhythm? Are you more of a night owl or more of a morning lark? And then understanding that and then putting your exercise in around it.
So I guess you can be fairly self-prescriptive on what works for you.
Yeah.
So we've gone from potentially a sleep routine. We're now in bed and our brain has got 3 different stories going on.
Yeah.
We've got the music actually in one ear but not in the other. And we're thinking about maybe what's happening when we wake up. So we're not falling asleep easily.
No.
What's happening is that literally what's happening in the brain? It's still wired on. We're still acquiring that dopamine hit. Is that the function?
Yes. Yeah. The short answer is yes. It's just the inner chaos spreads into the body. So the more we then think about what we got on the next day, maybe worrying about things, building things up in anticipation, then you're tensing yourself. Especially if you say, oh, I've only got 3 hours left to sleep now. I have to fall asleep. And then you build up more of that tension. And unfortunately, that becomes counterproductive. Paradoxically, you then can't drift off because you're activating more adrenaline.
Yeah.
So if you struggle regularly with insomnia because of that, lying awake in the middle of the night, one useful tip is to get out of bed for a bit. Again, moving about, doing something that isn't super strenuous at that point, but something that's a bit boring. Back in the day when I first trained, we used to say, go and read the phone book. But that doesn't exist anymore. But, a thing like that, you're like flicking through something that doesn't give you lots of excitement, but helps you to kind of go, oh, here's the sleep train coming into the station. I'm going to jump onto it. Read a book that's a little bit boring. And if you can't drift asleep because you're actually, rather than being very alert and worried, you've actually got lots of ideas. That can happen. Like, wow, I just had a brainwave. Having a little notepad next to your bed where you jot it down can be helpful, because often ADHDers can feel like, I can't go to sleep now because I have to action that in my head.
Right.
Like replying to a WhatsApp message in your head. Then you think, oh, I replied to that, but you haven't. You just thought about it at 2 a.m. That doesn't help. So jotting it down means that you can then park it and let it go and be safe that you will remember it in the morning.
That's a great tip.
And if it's a good idea in the morning, if it's still good when you read through it, then it's good. If you think, what is this crap that I just thought of? Then you just leave it. Some of your ideas do need to die, and that's okay.
There we go. Top tip.
Very good
Next
tip.
to it. And I also hear people not being able to fall asleep unless there's noise or music or a conversation or something.
Or some sort of
more
white
than
noise,
white
yeah.
noise.
Yeah.
Is that an ADHD trait? Is that...
It does not exclusive to that, but it's common in the ADHD community. So again, sort of not causality, not thinking, oh, wow, I have that, so I now must be ADHD.
Yeah.
But it's common in people who are neurodivergent to need to have some sort of stimulation.
Yeah.
That's why sometimes people can fall asleep in front of the TV. And when their partner goes, right, go to bed, turn off the TV, they're like wide awake. Because there's no stimulation happening. So having things like music, there are, obviously soft headbands you can wear now, which have audio playing in your ears, so you don't have to lie on something that's inside your ears, because that can mean that it falls out or it gets uncomfortable. So just working with that, and think, actually, if I need that to sleep, then I need that to sleep. The difficulty with ADHD and sleep is that even when we are asleep, we don't have the same quality of sleep.
Right, okay.
Right? So the stuff that's going on.
Is that in our deep sleep, stage 1, stage 2, non-REM, REM? So non-rapid eye movement is our deepest form of sleep. And then rapid eye movement is probably when people remember if they've dreamt. That's our rapid eye movement. So what happens in that ADHD brain in those sleep stages?
It's the deep sleep. They don't tend to get as much deep sleep. And some people have, again, it's obviously biased because you have sleep studies of people who really feel that they have problems with sleep and then go to a sleep lab and get that studied. Whereas we have the majority of ADHDers don't have an awareness of that. But you can track your sleep, your brainwaves in your sleep with devices like Muse, which sort of senses your brainwaves as you are asleep or as you are awake, meditating. And what we can see is that we tend to have more alpha wave activation. You're like, well, what is the alpha wave?
Yeah, what is that?
All that. It's associated with things like being sort of relaxed, but also being alert, or like you're daydreaming. So that means that even when you were asleep and you think, well, I should be restorative now, you might have lots of stuff going on, like vivid dreams or playing out things in your mind. And then you wake up and like, oh my God, what was that? And you don't even know if that was a dream or a sleep state. So basically having activity happening in your brain 24/7, even when you are asleep, there's restlessness going on. And that means that even when you've had 8-9 hours of sleep, you might wake up and still not feel refreshed.
And that's when you're waking up feeling fatigued.
Yeah.
So because your brain's not completely dropped into that non-REM stage, so your recovery is less because we've not got the time to process the thoughts from the day that's previously gone. Our brain's not clearing itself, not completely recovering and restoring in that sleep. How's that feeling then when we're waking up?
Groggy for a lot of people, depending on when you are in your sleep cycle. But so if we assume that people have slept enough hours and they still feel like they're not waking up refreshed, then that can be going on, that the sleep quality isn't good. But a lot of people just don't go to bed on time and don't get enough hours of sleep. So that is obviously a sleep deprivation.
Yeah.
And obviously a lot of the people I see have kids that also cause sleep deprivation. So having disturbed patterns of sleep can really exacerbate the executive dysfunction I've talked about, like how able you are to plan and organize and manage your time. But not just that, also your mood. You can feel much more likely to feel down, depressed, hopeless. What's the point? More likely to be anxious and wired and stressed and thinking about the negatives. And ADHD brains are already wired for negativity. We have a negativity bias.
Really?
Yeah, glass half empty in some ways. So that's why it's more likely also to be that we could develop depression or anxiety. So we already have those links. So it's rather complex. It's not as simple as I'm a bit negative, but it means that it's difficult to remind yourself of the positives as well. And on the flip side of that, we have it like almost like a childlike sense of idealism and almost being naive and optimistic in some ways. We're like, it will be fine. I will drive here in 45 minutes. Never mind if it's going to be in the traffic, that'll be fine. And that can get us into trouble as well.
Yeah.
If you've had bad sleep, then that, it'll be fine kind of goes away a little bit. And it's just like, oh my God, everything's going to go to crap. I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm not good enough. Everyone else is going to judge. That's the kind of internal dialogue I hear a lot from the clients I support. And bad sleep makes that worse.
Wow.
And then you've spoken about burnout. So I'm guessing if you are fatigued, yet your brain is still as active and in different places at the same time, throw in poor sleep. What is burnout? What's an ADHD burnout? How does it appear? What does it look like?
It depends. Again, these sort of terms are used more pop psychology terms, but defining if it's burnout or bore out.
Oh, okay. So what's the difference then?
So there's kind of almost like polar opposite sides of the spectrum. And it's almost like there's a sweet spot of having just the right amount of stimulation for the ADHD brain. If you have too much, you're overproductive or you're overworking, you push yourself, then you can hit burnout because you're just doing too many things. And that pattern can come from this fear of not being able to do anything at all. Fear of like, oh, I'm going to get into the procrastination or won't be able to concentrate or can't focus. And now that I finally am able to do something, I'm going to just push through it because who knows how long this productivity is going to last, right? And that's why it becomes very like push-pull, very up and down, like a roller coaster. And if you keep going that for too long, pushing through and not listening to your body's signals that you need to rest, then you hit burnout. Bore out, on the other hand, can be when we're understimulated. So ADHDers need fun, we need freedom, we need adventure, we need flexibility. We need things that sort of like almost like light a spark. And that's why ADHDers can also be like the life and the soul of the party, where you'd be like, oh, I'm drawn to this person. They're magnetic, they're lovely, they're fun to talk to. but that comes at a cost. And if they don't get to do those things, it's like they get to be a grayer version of themselves. That can be so horrible that they get depressed. I've just got no stimulation. I've got nothing. There's nothing novel. And I see that a lot in mums.
Do you?
Because then suddenly their whole world shrinks. They no longer have freedom. They're now confined to doing this thing that's actually quite boring and mundane day to day. And they're not feeling stimulated. They lost a part of their identity. And so, that gets really difficult.
Does that then have a knock-on effect back into that sleep cycle? Because if you're not stimulated, we've not exhausted any of our body, we've not exhausted our brain. So we're already setting ourselves up not to even feel tired.
Yeah.
So does then that ricochet down?
It does. And then as you can imagine, if you'd be like, I don't feel like it. I don't feel like going to the gym, or I don't feel like moving. I don't feel like taking a walk, because you're in the bore out. You don't have enough stimulation. You then have stagnated. And that inertia, as in being like, I'm still, I can't get going, is very common in ADHD. So there's a kind of, I have a Newton's cradle at home, one of those hanging on threads, the little balls.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
And you can sort of pull one end and it goes clicker, 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 clicker. Someone has to pull on one end to get you going. So to start to go from being inertia to movement is really, really hard. And that's where the self-criticism comes in, where people beat themselves up, like, why am I so lazy? Why can't I just go to the gym like other people? Or why can't I just go for a walk? Why is it so difficult? I've spent 3 hours thinking about going for a walk and I still haven't done it. Because going from stillness to movement is really hard. That's just plain physics.
Yeah.
But once it is in movement, once in motion, we'll stay in motion. So sometimes we need someone else to pull the clicker-clacker and go, okay, let me help you. Let me get you going. And that's where body doubling with other people, like doubling up with someone else who wants to move, can really be helpful.
Top tips for that. I can think of one off the top of my head. Good old group exercise class with somebody that you know. Yeah. So you've got that connection and you've got that friend. Anything else from your point of view that is good to get that going again?
I mean, I love that for accountability. We definitely need someone to sit with us. So it's called body doubling, that you literally sit with someone else and they're just with you. They don't even have to do the thing that you're doing. So sit with someone whilst they're filling out a form, because then the accountability of having another body right next to you can help.
Okay, right.
Yeah? So even committing to say to your friend, like, I'm going to go for a walk right now, and the friend goes, yeah, me too. And you go somewhere, separate walks, whatever, that means that you're more likely to do it because you've committed it to someone else. You are literally being body doubled. So that's a top tip for anyone to kind of buddy up with other people, strength in numbers. We are very much needing other people to help us to get going. Again, be kind to yourself. So really think about how can you motivate yourself with a carrot rather than a stick. Probably, if you're listening, you've been kind of harsh on yourself the whole life, thinking, oh, I'm so useless, I'm lazy or stupid, just do it. So the whole Nike slogan of just do it can be really difficult. Just remember it's really hard for you to do it. Yeah. Then coach yourself through it, say that you're really courageous and brave, and then do it. Like, that's much more long-winded and it's not as snappy, but it's kind of, that's what it looks like for a lot of my clients. They can't just make themselves do it. They have to encourage themselves gently and kindly to do it. And then it's more likely to happen.
And stick with it as well, I suppose.
Sticking with it is a different story. That's much harder to do. So that's consistency, which is really difficult. I'm sure you know as trainers that consistency and persistence gives better results if you are doing it consistently. If you train once a month for 3 hours, that's not as helpful as training for 5 minutes every day. But consistency is difficult. It's really difficult. Yeah. Because then we get distracted or something else gets in the way, and then you literally forget that the gym existed, even though you went 3 days ago and loved it. That is ADHD.
Wow.
I know, it's brilliant.
So interesting.
For all of this. It's such good insights. So just recapping, if we can, recapping on a sleep routine, recapping on what happens if you wake up in the middle of the night, and how you potentially then remotivate yourself if you've had a substantial amount of time with poor quality sleep, how you get that going again. So sleep routine, start off with.
Again, really noticing what gets in the way, what's the barriers to you going to bed. So it's probably not going to be the fact that you've not drunk enough water, or it's probably going to be you, right? So there's going to be something that you are doing that gets in the way of you going to sleep. So being curious rather than furious with yourself about what that is, and see if you can enlist someone else to help you, like put the phone away or block it from, say, 8 p.m. or something so you can't look at it, and really kind of untangle some of those barriers. And then the classic things like caffeine is always given as a sleep hygiene tip. Some ADHDers need to have a cup of coffee to be able to find energy to go to bed. So it's mind-blowing.
Wow.
The level of difference in how people respond to caffeine, where some people are caffeine sensitive. I can't ever drink any caffeine because then I can't sleep whatsoever.
It's like me.
So we're all different. And some people need the caffeine to regulate enough of the sort of the internal restlessness, because caffeine stimulates, right? So we need stimulant. This is the paradox, that if you've got a buzzy mind, why do I need to stimulate? Well, you think you need to calm, but some people cannot calm it, they need to stimulate it.
Right.
So again, don't be dogmatic about do this, do that. Try to find a plan that works for you and play around with it. Like, okay, so when I've had less sugar in the day, I slept better. When I exercised at midday, I slept better. When I exercised in the evening, I didn't. Or when I had a hot bath, I did. And
do you get your clients to sort of keep a journal of what they're doing? Do you find that helps?
Yeah, get some data, basically. Look at what works and what doesn't work. And if the idea of writing all of that down feels awful, then feed it into ChatGPT.
Yeah, definitely.
Good old voice notes as well.
If you do the waking up in the night because you've had those thoughts or you're just stimulated to wake up, top tips around that, or how you even get back to sleep after that?
So if it's you're waking up because you're excited about something, try to write down the ideas, park them and say, okay, actually, I'm letting you go. You'll be here tomorrow. I'll go back to it. And then try to not sort of fight against the sleeplessness, but surrender into it. So even if you lie in there with your eyes closed, just resting, rest is still really restorative for the body, even if you don't fall asleep. But giving up that struggle against the sleep might paradoxically help you to fall asleep.
Yeah.
So if you're just going to lie here and, count my breaths, like breathing in, 1, breathing out, 2. And then when you get to 10, you start over. Because that gives you an anchor of something that isn't inside your head.
Right.
So, full permission to just rest, closed eyes, just feel the softness of your sheets, count your breaths, and don't fight it. You might fall asleep. If you feel like you've tried that for at least half an hour, get out of bed, wander around for a bit, have a glass of water, and then go back to sleep again. Or even sometimes it works for ADHD is to change the sleep setting. So if you've been feeling like I can't go to sleep in the bed, go and see if you can get a few more hours on the sofa. That might work.
Wow. That's good. I love it. And then fatigued or bored fatigued or non-slept fatigued. Tips for coping with the day, tips for potentially you highlighted that you might be feeling more anxious or indeed you're feeling really down on yourself.
Yeah.
Tips on there.
Energized through music. Find the music that works for you. There's even whole playlists out there on Spotify if you search for like ADHD upbeat music or whatever, the particular beats that helps to stimulate your brain. Binaural beats can help for some people where you have sort of, it goes back and forth between your ears if you listen in stereo. So having something that helps you get more alert, move your body and be kind to yourself. Some days you're going to want to doing all the things right. You still feel like a potato and that's going to happen. That's the normal cyclical nature of energy in ADHD, especially if you're a female and you have a cycle, then you will have certain weeks that will just not be as energetic, and that's okay.
It is.
Amazing.
Recognise yourself and be kind.
Be kind. I like that you keep saying be kind to yourself.
Absolutely, be kind.
So thank you so much.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
We are going to put a contact to your website underneath this podcast. So team, if you do have any questions, please do email them in and we will pass them over.
So our email address, just to remind you, is podcast@everyoneactive.com and we will pass those on to you.
Thank you.
But Michaela, thank you so much for such an insight.
We've both been sitting here thinking, okay, that's me.
Yeah, I can actually even sense like James and David going, yep, that's one of Joe's. Yep, that's another one.
We've been trying not to make eye contact behind the cameras.
I've been seeing them sniggering. Mainly about me, so that's fine.
Oh dear. But team, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And please, honestly, if you have questions, we will pass them over to Michaela. And if you want to get in contact directly with Michaela, your website link will be on this podcast. So team, leave us a lovely review.
Yeah, and share this as well to all your friends as well.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you once again for listening.
Nice to see you.
Take care, team. Bye.